Hello, this is Michael Garino, and I'm going to give you an overview of Plural's current and future AI capabilities and what it could potentially offer to your platform engineering teams. Um, First, just to set the stage and give you a foundational understanding of what Plural is before going into some of the higher level features like integration with an LLM. Plural is meant to be an enterprise grade Kubernetes software development lifecycle. It goes from everything from continuous deployment, basically a fleet scale, enterprise scale continuous deployment engine that's very similar to Argo CD and Flux, just on steroids, and re-architected for security in mind. Also, Terraform or infrastructure as code management with stacks, which you can see here. It will subscribe to Git repositories at some branch and folder location and run the entire Terraform development workflow for you based on that configuration. It also can be instantiable via Kubernetes CRD, which gives you a sort of GitOps CD experience on top of Terraform workflow, which is not trivial to do otherwise. And then there's the ability to automate the generation of PRs and the various sort of manual rock moving code changes throughout your GitOps estate with PR automations and other various abstractions on top of the various routine code changes you need to do. This is all built with a enterprise-grade agent-based architecture. You install our deployment operator in any of your clusters, and Plural can use that then to manage it by communicating to its central control plane, which in this case is hosted at console.boot.aws.on_Plural.sh, but could be self-hosted or hosted in our cloud environment for you, however your enterprise chooses to deploy the software. The important thing to mention, though, is, and why I go to that detail, is all of that robust enterprise-grade foundation propagates up into the AI experience. You have the agent-based architecture to make sure that the AI has the appropriate secure access to the end clusters to get the appropriate runtime telemetry as to what's going wrong. You also have the entire permissioning system of Plural, which connects with your enterprise SSO to ensure that only users are able to access what needs to be what they have, and that their usage of the LLM is appropriately governed. That also that bring your own run it yourself model within Plural goes to the configuration of AI as well. So if you want to enable Plural AI, what you do is actually provide your own AI API keys, so whether they are OpenAI, Anthropic, Amazon Bedrock, or Google Vertex AI, and click enable, and all this functionality would start going to you for free, basically. Also worth mentioning, just from a cost perspective, the entire system is meant to be done in a very effective way. So it does a lot of caching on your behalf, and then it's also going to only trigger the AI when it detects it as being necessary. What we found is for our own usage, which is about 15 or so internal clusters within Plural, many of which are test clusters, but still at that rough estate, our OpenAI bill is roughly $3 a month or something like that, $3 a day, sorry. Completely de minimis in relation to, say, the budget that you might devote to a Datadog. It's certainly de minimis in relation to what our Datadog bill would ultimately be. Cool. So let's actually get to the nitty gritty of our AI functionality. First, one of the key workflows that Plural will provide once you've actually set up the AI integration is automatic troubleshooting and remediation. So say you have a service that's in a failing state. This is a great example of it. What's going to have to happen is someone in your engineering team, if you aren't able to automate this entire process, is going to have to do an investigative effort, and then I'm actually going to need to remediate the issue. So what that investigative effort, if it were driven by a human, would be is going to the service, seeing the failed deployment, looking at the pod, going into its events, seeing the image back off, going to the container itself, seeing the image back off. That's very likely the root cause. Now, either with a system with Plural, that's going to be a issue of manual, user interface interaction, or it might be kubectl. Regardless, is wasted time and wasted hours and mean time to recovery. What Plural does is basically going to automate that entire process for you. So that entire investigative train, that entire tree of evidence is going to be extracted entirely by our internal system and its ability to access those informations out of the Kubernetes API on top of our agent, and also to access the exact source code that's causally defining this to be configured, to ultimately get a pretty clear understanding and generate an insight for you as to what's going on. So you can see it's summarized it as saying, this is due to a pod and image pull back off state. It's finding the image tag that's actually in the incorrect state, giving you a little bit more clear evidence as to what's going on, some other observations as to what might be going on, and also suggesting how to debug it. Now we can go a step further and actually suggest the fix that might need to be done here. And so what it's doing is it's taking the actual Helm chart that's rendering the service, parsing it appropriately, and then actually suggesting the code change that would need to be done. So we can see that fully generated here for your review. And it's correctly identifying that this is the file that needs to be edited. And it would be edited to something like this. And then you would need to obviously do the gang clone and whatever. Now, this is actually completely correct. This is the file. The issue is due to the inline values override on the service deployment resource. And what's interesting about this is it's actually at a higher level than the definition of the service. So the service is a Helm chart service. The Helm chart is perfectly fine. What happened was it was misconfigured at the level of the CRD defining the service, which is actually synced by another service in a service of services, very similar to RCD app of app structure. Because we have that full introspection into the way that these resources are rendered within Plural, we can actually do that traversal natively within our platform and not require your engineer to remember the entire nuances and details of their GitOps code base to be able to fix this issue. And this is a thing that I've seen again and again. Engineers frequently forget about, ends up wasting way too much time, wasting way too much man hours, and ultimately keeping pressing issues unresolved for too long. So we're pretty happy with this change. What we'll do is we'll actually click the Create PR button right here. And once it's done thinking, it will actually create this PR for us, which we can go and look at. Now, I don't have the time to actually verify that that's the exact correct image tag, but we might as well just set it to latest and then ultimately merge it. And looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and approve it and merge it. And while the system is applying this change, we can go to the next stage of the demonstration of how Plural AI can work. So Plural doesn't only have the ability to automate the troubleshooting and investigation of Kubernetes related issues. It can actually also integrate directly with the Plural Stacks engine and troubleshoot a lot of common Terraform bugs as well. So we've got a simulated example of that right here. We have a Terraform stack that's in a failing state. We go to the job, you can see some very spammy Terraform output about an EC2 instance having issues. If you parse it a little bit closer, you can see it's due to an instance type having an issue. Engineers, even in the most basic case, and this is actually ultimately a relatively basic case, the image type has been misconfigured, just their eyes glaze over when they read Terraform output, and they frequently just struggle mightily to actually operationalize the fixes that are necessary. Fortunately, an LLM doesn't have these issues. We can just go straight to the insight that's been generated and see that it is in fact detecting that it should have been T2 micro instead of T2 macro. It's seeing the invalid parameter value, a lot of the details that might need to be done. It's actually figuring out already what the file needs to be. And we can just suggest the fix right now. So it's finding the appropriate Git repository that needs to be done, finding the exact line of the file, seeing it needs to go from macro to micro, we can just create this PR already and get going. Now let's go to the PR that's been generated. And you can see is in fact correct. Now before merging it, it's worth just mentioning that Plural does actually have a full PR automation, PR suite for Terraform runs. So whenever it detects a PR against your stack, it will start running a plan for that Terraform code, and it'll post it right back to the stack for you once it's done. So we can see that going right here. And it's actually, as you can see, just reverting it back to the current value in the state, which is perfectly fine. And we should be able to see eventually the stack system posts back the plan as a comment. So you can see that right here, which is a nice little additional feature. It will also, in fact, oftentimes generate a summary of the plan for you as well via the AI. So pretty simple little way to explain a lot of the details of Terraform, and that gets relatively well integrated into your CI/CD pipeline. Now we're just going to merge this. It's perfectly happy. And we should be able to go from there. Cool. Now just need to resync the stack, and we should see it starting to plan and apply in a second. We can go back to the original service that we had the issue with, and we should be able to see the failing service is now no longer in a failing state. The Nginx container is perfectly happy. And then we should see this should also complete its plan. And if we just approve it, it will apply the no-op change. Now, these are some relatively simple examples. Let's think of something a little bit more obscure. In this case, we have this service with a failing ingress Nginx controller. So if we look at the actual resource in Kubernetes, there's nothing really obvious as what's going on, or at least not obvious to the naked eye. If you're a little bit more attuned to what Kubernetes resources typically do, you would know that this empty load balancer means that it's a load balancer service. It's not able to fully provision. But you need to have a little bit of Kubernetes expertise to know that that's a possible failure case. And what's happened is our AI has started to sort of parse this out. And it's giving you an explanation of what's going on. And it's starting to actually contextualize it pretty well, because it knows that it's actually a K3's cluster, which you can see right here. And it's due to some load balancer configuration issues. It's actually appropriately suggesting that you probably need to think about something like MetaLLB as the way of provisioning load balancer services on K3s. But it's entirely possible this is a much more open-ended process than something that would require directly going to a fixed suggestion. So what we have available is the ability to go to a full chat. Now, I'm just going to say that I don't really want to use MetaLLB, and I want some alternatives. So Cool. And you can see some interesting ideas. I think the host networking idea would probably be one of the more simple ones to use. But, maybe you want to investigate traffic, and you have at least the docs available to you to do that. So um, you can use it as a pretty easy way to explore potential ideas with the assistance of the AI, and also use additional context that you have available to you within the context of Plural to enhance the AI's context window with whatever it needs to be able to appropriately suggest the right fix to you. Now, the final feature that we have available that's worth calling out is our Explain with AI feature. So whenever there's a relatively complicated page within Plural, and a Kubernetes dashboard view is a really great example of that, you have this Explain this page nub that will become available to users. The context behind this is what we have consistently found is that platform engineering and SRE teams frequently become internal technical support for their application development teams who have neither the time nor interest in learning the details of the Kubernetes API or the Kubernetes ecosystem and just want to get along with writing their code. That's an entirely natural impulse, but it means that they're pushing off a lot of that knowledge gathering to their platform engineering teams and overwhelming them with basically very low impact work that consumes their time in answering very basic questions. This is a workflow that should be completely done by an AI. And fortunately, with Plural, you have that right at your fingertips. So any of these views, Plural will appropriately trigger a prompt to explain what's going on. And you can see it fully generating out here. And some nice aspects of this that's worth mentioning is it oftentimes will figure out not only that it's a Kubernetes deployment, pretty basic, but it's using well-known tools, like in this case, Cert Manager. So it's actually explaining what Cert Manager is around TLS certificate management, giving some docs to Cert Manager, docs to Helm, because it detected that was actually provisioned with Helm, and then the docs of a Kubernetes deployment specifically. Really great information that to help a user troubleshoot what's going on with Kubernetes. You might ask, well, they could ChatGPT this, but what I've seen is people struggle mightily just to explore a UI, let alone know how to selectively export the appropriate data for something complicated like a Kubernetes API object into an interface like ChatGPT. And then there's the additional security and governance question as to whether, one, you even have access to a lot of publicly available LLMs, and then whether it's secure for them to do that. You have the governance completely integrated within Plural and its permissioning structure available to you. So all of those questions can be answered very elegantly with a platform that's fully integrated like Plural. Like the Ingress Nginx example we showed before, you can go to a full chat for any explain page as well, and get maybe a shorter example of what's explained before. Great. And I had mentioned that we have a larger roadmap than what you're seeing right now. This is very much our V0 or V0.5 of our intentions around the AI space. To give you a teaser as to what we want to go to next, first is extending our AI troubleshooting capabilities to not just the infrastructure configuration level, but also to app code level bugs and troubleshooting. What this will end up requiring of us, and we think it's entirely possible to do, is integration with a lot of observability providers like Prometheus and logging providers like Elasticsearch or Victoria Metrics' new Victoria logs or Splunk, to then collate data with a lot of common alarming frameworks and give a very similar automated insight for app code level issues as alongside the automation for misconfiguration of Kubernetes YAML or misconfiguration of Terraform code. There's obviously a huge amount of manual work that comes from common software troubleshooting, and we think if we can reduce a lot of that, that unlocks your engineers to focus on much more high value stuff. The other really key aspect that we think there's a lot of leverage for AI is on the cost management side. So there's a lot of different pretty mature products around cost management. We integrate directly with KubeCost or OpenCost, but there's also Cast AI. All of them at the basic level do what this UI is doing, which is just giving you a quick dashboard as to what the relative costs of your clusters are and the absolute cost of those clusters. And then oftentimes in the case of Kubernetes, giving you namespace level breakdowns of those costs. The problem with that though is while that's really useful and informative, there's a process that comes in the back end as to how to act on that information. And frequently that process is highly inefficient and is just not carried out. So what we're going to do is build a full recommendation engine based on the cost information, and then integrate it with the code modification capabilities that you saw with the suggested fix to actually automate the generation of the PRs that are necessary against your GitOps code to make these changes. We think this can be done with relatively high fidelity, but at the very least, it's going to be a PR and you can dismiss it if necessary. But when it's correct, your engineers would have no excuse not to take an appropriate scaling recommendation and retrieve some cost savings for your enterprise. Cool. So that's a very quick overview of all the capabilities we have in the AI space and a little bit of a teaser as to what we're going to be building in the next few months. If this is interesting or exciting to you, we would love to give a more thorough or deeper demo in a call. So if that's of interest, feel free to reach out to our team at sales@Plural.sh, or you can feel free to jump into our Discord and we can chat further. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully it was an interesting demo.